Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Foundry by Forge College. I am absolutely thrilled to jump into today's explainer, where we are tackling a super critical topic: measuring value and identifying limitations. Look, we've spent a ton of time recently tearing down past case studies, observing what works and, honestly, what completely and sometimes spectacularly falls apart. But today, we pivot. We're transitioning from just observing history to drawing up a real prescriptive blueprint for your own real-world blockchain projects. We need to move from saying, oh, hey, that's a neat idea, to asking, wait, should we actually build this thing? All right, let's dive right in.
So here is the game plan for today. We'll start with an intro to evaluation, compare an archive to a filing cabinet, run a real-world land registry test, build your step-by-step blueprint, tackle the ethics of immutability, and then wrap the whole workflow up. Let's get to it.
Section 1. Introduction to Evaluation. Moving from descriptive analysis to a prescriptive blueprint. Okay, so we've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. Now we need a solid, repeatable framework to figure out if a proposed solution should be on-chain, off-chain, or maybe some kind of hybrid. To evaluate this properly, we really have to root our criteria in the core philosophy of Web3. Basically, we need to figure out if a problem actually needs a blockchain at all, or if you're just using a massive sledgehammer to swat a tiny fly. Remember, trust minimization, where participants don't have to rely on a central authority, is an incredible superpower. But having thousands of independent nodes double-check your math? Yeah, that is not cheap, and it is definitely not private. The hard truth is, not every transparency problem actually benefits from being put on-chain.
All right, Section 2, Archive versus Filing Cabinet. Let's look at a mental model. To quickly figure out where a blockchain adds genuine value, let's use a physical analogy. It's a fantastic, rapid sanity check to use before you blow your budget on deep, expensive analysis. Think of a public blockchain like a giant, open, centuries-old city archive. It is incredibly durable. Literally anyone can walk in and verify a historical record, and absolutely nobody can just sneak in and rip out a page. Now compare that to a private ledger. That's more like a locked corporate filing cabinet sitting in a dusty basement. It is totally controlled by authorized personnel. If there's a typo, Bob from accounting just grabs some correction fluid, fixes the paper, and locks it back up. It gives you centralized privacy and extremely low overhead. Let's break down those trade-offs, shall we? The archive model is absolutely fantastic for public auditability, especially when you're dealing with totally distrustful parties. It radically drops systemic risk. But its immutability makes fixing errors a total nightmare. You definitely wouldn't want to put sensitive, easily mistyped personal data into a stone carving, right? Plus, distributed trust skyrockets your coordination costs. It takes way more time, energy, and money to run a global city archive than it does to just hand Bob the key to the basement.
Section 3. The Land Registry Test. Let's test drive this with a real-world scenario.
Imagine a local government wants to move land titles on-chain to completely stop fraud and speed up transfers. Go ahead and grab your clipboards, because the very first thing we have to do here is map out our primary stakeholders, figure out their goals, and nail down exactly how we'll measure success. For property owners, their main goal is a clear title. We quantify that by tracking title disputes per 1,000 transfers. For the registrar, the goal is legal validity, which we measure by the percentage of records that actually hold up in court. And for lenders, they just want low risk, so we track their default rates. The golden rule here is to always translate fuzzy qualitative goals into hard, cold metrics.
Now notice how our bright, lofty expectations can really contrast with reality. We can easily hypothesize massive drops in fraud and super fast transfer times, as you can see sketched out here. But we need concrete baseline data to actually prove it. What does a 20% reduction in fraud actually look like in real local currency cost savings? We have to quantify these alleged benefits to figure out if the massive coordination costs of running a blockchain are genuinely worth it.
And of course, we also have to spot what we call risk vectors. A risk vector is basically a specific scenario where our beautiful philosophical assumptions crash headfirst into the messy real world. For example, what if you build this perfectly immutable, trustless, on-chain property transfer system, and then a local judge simply looks at it and says, yeah, no thanks, I don't legally recognize this. If a court refuses to treat your blockchain entry as definitive, your legal clarity instantly drops to zero. And all those amazing hypothesized benefits just vanish into thin air.
Moving right along to Section 4, your step-by-step blueprint and evaluation checklist.
To completely avoid those disastrous risk vectors, we rely on a reproducible 6-step checklist. You can confidently apply this to literally any proposed project. Step 1. Frame the problem and set your boundary conditions.
Step 2. Map those metrics directly to stakeholder goals. Step 3. Take a thorough inventory of your risks. Step 4. Match the architecture, meaning ask yourself, are you building an archive or a cabinet? Step 5. Check the ethics and legalities. And finally, Step 6. Design a tightly time-boxed pilot with super clear measurable success criteria. Following these exact 6 steps ensures your technical decisions are totally auditable and defensible.
Section 5. The ethics of immutability. Handling irreversible decisions.
This brings us to a really sobering reality check. Ethical responsibility is not some optional bolt-on feature you just think about at the very end. It has to be baked right into the infrastructure. Seriously, what actually happens when a mistake is permanently carved into digital stone? Imagine a registrar accidentally mistypes a single number and transfers your family home to a scammer on a completely immutable public ledger. If there is no central authority with the power to hit undo, the technology hasn't just failed, it has caused actual irreversible harm. In that scenario, you have actively destroyed the safety nets available to everyday people.
So the million-dollar question is, how do we solve this at the infrastructure level? Well, this is exactly why a hybrid architecture is often the smartest, most pragmatic choice you can make. By storing cryptographic proofs, like hashes, on a public ledger, you get all that juicy public verifiability of an archive. But by keeping the actual sensitive, readable database off-chain, you maintain the operational flexibility of the filing cabinet. It's brilliant. It gives you tamper-evident proof without sacrificing your ability to legally fix a typo or comply with privacy laws. It really is the best of both worlds.
Finally, Section 6. Wrapping up. Let's do a quick workflow review.
We have covered a ton of ground today, transforming philosophical intent into responsible, rock-solid technical decisions. So let's quickly recap. First, always match your infrastructure to your values. Remember that archive versus filing cabinet mental check. Second, favor hybrid pragmatism to prevent permanent harm. You absolutely have to preserve human oversight whenever outcomes directly impact human rights. And third, always quantify and document your claims. For literally every single alleged benefit, you must insist on a measurable indicator and a baseline, no exceptions.
All right, here is your next assignment. For your next lesson, I want you to write a short memo applying this exact 6-step workflow to a case study of your choosing. You'll need to list out stakeholder goals, baseline metrics, a full risk inventory, and then recommend an architecture. Think of this not just as homework, but as an awesome challenge. It is the essential bridge between making technical decisions and seeing real-world application.
Before we go, I want to leave you with this final, somewhat provocative thought to guide your future evaluations. Think really carefully about what you are truly building. Are you actually building a public archive for history? Or are you just trying to hide a filing cabinet using some really fancy tech? Keep that question front and center. Thank you so much for hanging out with me in this explainer. Please go visit forge.college to explore even more Web3 concepts and continue mastering these fundamentals. I will see you in the next explainer.